My grandmother wrote 3 words on every dollar that ever passed through her hands. And the day I learned what those words were, I stopped being poor. Not slowly, not over years, from that day. Because what she taught me was not a trick of money at all. It was a trick of the heart, and the money only followed where the heart had already gone. I was a young man, newly married, and we had nothing. I do not say that the way people say it who have a roof and a full table, and call themselves poor because they cannot buy what they want. I mean we had nothing. We counted coins to know if we could buy flour, and I was bitter about it, in the quiet way a proud young man is bitter. And I went to my grandmother's house one evening because hers was the only door where I could let the bitterness show. She was sitting at her table with her money box open, doing what she did every Sunday, going through what little she had. And I watched her take each bill, each coin, and before she set it in its place, she would hold it a moment, and her lips would move. 3 words, every time. Same 3 words. I asked her what she was saying, and she smiled the way the old smile at the young, when the young are about to be handed something they are not yet wise enough to know the worth of. And she told me the 3 words. And then she told me why they were the whole secret of wealth, the entire code, the thing the banks will never teach you because there is no profit in it for them. I am going to tell you those 3 words tonight. And I am going to tell you why. If you begin saying them over your money the way she did, your whole relationship with what you have will change inside of a single day. Not a year, a day. Because this is not a change in your circumstances. It is a change in your eyes. And a man's eyes change in an instant, the moment he decides to see truly. But let me make you wait a little, the way she made me wait. Because a thing handed over too quickly is never valued. Let me first tell you what most people say over their money, without ever knowing they are saying it. Because before you can learn the 3 right words, you have to hear the 3 wrong ones you have been whispering your whole life. The first wrong word is not enough. Most people, when they look at what they have, say in their hearts, not enough. They open the wallet, they look in the box, they check the number. And the very first thing their soul whispers is, not enough. Not enough for what I want. Not enough for what I fear. Not enough to rest. And here is the cruelty of it. A man who says not enough over $1 will say not enough over 1,000, and over 10,000, and over a fortune. Because not enough is not a fact about the money. It is a habit of the heart. My grandmother said it plain. A greedy man with a full barn is poorer than a grateful man with a single loaf, because the greedy man cannot taste what he has for staring at what he lacks. I knew that bitterness myself, sitting at her table. I had a few coins, and I hated them for being few, and she saw it on me the way she always could. I have watched that word destroy a man named Eli, who was the richest farmer in our whole district. Land in every direction. Barns full, more than any plain man has a right to. And do you know he was the most miserable soul I ever sat across from? Because every harvest, no matter how good, he would stand at the edge of his fields, and the first thing out of his mouth was not enough. Not enough rain, or too much. Not enough yield. Not enough put by for whatever disaster he was certain was coming. He had everything a man could want, and he tasted none of it, because his heart had learned 1 word in childhood and never unlearned it. He died a wealthy man and a starving soul, and at his funeral I thought, there lies a man who owned 1,000 acres and never once felt he had enough ground to stand on. That is what not enough does. It is a hole in the bottom of the soul, and you may pour the whole world into it and never hear it strike bottom. The second wrong word is mine. When a person gets money, the heart clenches around it. Mine. I earned it. I keep it. I hold it close. And there is a half-truth in that, so it deceives us. Of course, a man should be careful with what he earns. But the heart that says only mine, that grips with a closed fist, learns a terrible thing without knowing it learned it. A closed fist cannot receive. The same hand you clench to keep money in is the hand money must pass through to reach you. My grandmother would hold up her own old hand, fingers curled tight, and say, "See, nothing can come into a fist. It can only come into an open palm." The miser and the generous man both end with empty hands in the grave, she said, but only one of them had anything pass through while he lived. She told me once of her own uncle, a man who had a reputation across 3 counties for holding the first dollar he ever earned. He would not lend, would not give, would not spend a cent he was not forced to spend, and people thought him shrewd. But my grandmother knew the truth of him. She said his fist was so tight that not only could nothing leave it, nothing could enter it either. Opportunities passed him by because no one wished to do business with a closed hand. Friends fell away because a fist makes a poor companion. He grew old alone, guarding a pile he could not enjoy and would not share. And when he died, the pile was divided among people who had not loved him and scattered to the winds inside a year. He spent his whole life, my grandmother said, guarding a thing he was always going to lose anyway. And in the guarding, he lost everything that was actually worth keeping. The fist keeps the dollar and loses the life. The open hand may lose a dollar here and there, but everything good that ever comes to a person comes through an open hand. The third wrong word is later. This is the quietest of the 3 and the most deadly. Later. I will be careful later. I will be grateful later, when there is more to be grateful for. I will give later, when I can afford it. I will start later, when things settle. And later is the word that has buried more dreams than failure ever has. Because failure at least teaches you something. Later teaches you nothing. It only postpones you into the grave. My grandmother had no patience for later. She said the only soil a seed can grow in is today's soil. Tomorrow's soil does not exist. It is always, only, ever today. I think of a man I grew up beside, named Daniel, a good and clever man, cleverer than me by far. And all his life he said later. He would begin saving later, when the children were grown. He would give later, when the farm was secure. He would rest later, enjoy his wife's company later, learn to be content later, always later, when the conditions were finally right. And do you know, the conditions were never right, not once in his whole life, because the conditions are never right. That is the trap. Later promises a day that the world is not built to deliver. Daniel died, still waiting for the right time to begin living. With money in the bank, he never let himself enjoy, and never let himself give. Money that did him no good held, and would have done great good flowing. He starved at a full table, because he kept saying grace would come later. The bell that calls you to the meal is always ringing now. There is no later seating. Not enough. Mine. Later. Those are the 3 words the poor heart whispers over every dollar, and they are a curse, though no one casts them on purpose. They are simply what an untaught heart does. And as long as you whisper them, you may pile up money to the rafters, and you will still be a poor man, because poverty was never about the pile. It was always about the whisper. Now, lean in, because here are the 3 words my grandmother wrote over every dollar instead. Here is the code. The first word is enough, not enough. Enough. When she took a bill in her hand, the first thing she said over it was that it was enough. Now hear me, because this is subtle and the foolish will miss it. She did not mean that she had all she could ever want. She was a poor woman to the end of her days by the world's measure. What she meant was deeper. She meant, this, what is in my hand right now, is enough for this moment. It will buy what this day requires. And a heart that can say enough over what it holds has already won the only war that matters. Because the war was never against poverty. It was against the endless hunger that no amount of money has ever once fed. The richest man alive cannot buy the feeling of enough. It is not for sale. It can only be spoken. So speak it. Over the little you have, speak it. This is enough. And watch the panic leave your hands. A calm hand keeps money. A panicked hand throws it away, chasing the feeling of safety it could have had for free. There was a widow in our community, Mary, left with 5 children and a debt and a farm. She did not know how to work alone. By every measure, she should have drowned. And she came to my grandmother in tears, and my grandmother did not give her money, though she gave what little she could. She gave her the word instead. She sat with Mary, and she made her say it over the few dollars in her apron. "This is enough for today." And Mary thought it was nonsense, the way you may be thinking it is nonsense now. But she was desperate enough to try, and desperate people sometimes stumble onto wisdom the comfortable never find. And Mary told me years later, when her children were grown and her farm was paid, that the word enough had saved her life. Not because it paid a single bill, but because it stopped her from the panic that would have made her sell the farm for nothing, or marry the first cruel man who offered, or give up entirely. Enough gave her a calm place to stand, and from a calm place a person can work. From a panicked place, a person can only flail and sink. She built everything she built on that one word, spoken over almost nothing, on the worst day of her life. The second word is blessing. She held each coin and called it a blessing, not because she was simple, but because she was wise enough to know that what you call a thing is what it becomes to you. Call your money a burden, and it will weigh on you. Call it a worry, and it will worry you. Call it never enough, and it will starve you. But call it a blessing, and a strange thing happens. You begin to handle it the way you handle a blessing, with care, with gratitude, with a little reverence. You stop wasting it the way you waste things you resent, and you start tending it the way you tend things you are thankful for. My grandmother said money is like a dog. It can smell how you feel about it. Resent it and it runs from you. Bless it and it stays and breeds and comes when called. The third word, the last word, the one she said was the seal on the other 2. The third word is flow. She would set the money down and say, flow. And what she meant was this: money is not meant to be dammed up like a pond going stale. It is meant to move like a river, in and out, watering everything it passes. The poor heart wants to stop the river, to hold every drop, and a stopped river becomes a swamp, stagnant, breeding nothing but rot. But a flowing river is alive. It gives and it receives. It feeds the field, and the field feeds the man, and the man returns to the river. She gave, always, even when she had little, a coin to one in need, food from her own table, not because she was rich enough to, but because she understood that giving is what keeps the river moving, and a moving river always finds its way back to the sea, fuller than it left. Hold money, she said, and you have a puddle. Let it flow, and you have a spring that never runs dry. I will tell you the strangest thing I ever saw her do, so you understand how deep she believed this. There was a winter when we were all hard-pressed, and a family 2 farms over lost their barn to fire. My grandmother had been saving, slow, for a year toward something she needed, and she took nearly all of it and she gave it to that family. And I, foolish young man that I was angry at her for it. I told her she could not afford it, and she looked at me with great patience and she said, "Child, I cannot afford not to. If I dam the river now, out of fear, I teach my own heart that there is not enough, and that lesson will cost me more than the money ever could. And I tell you, I do not fully understand it to this day. But that family prospered, and helped others in turn, and the kindness moved through that whole district for years like water finding every low place. And my grandmother never wanted, not once. The river she refused to dam kept coming back to her in ways I could never have predicted and cannot fully explain. A gift here, a good turn there, a debt forgiven, a harvest shared. She let it flow, and it flowed back. It always did. Enough, blessing, flow. Those are the 3 words. That is the whole code. And I know what you are thinking, because I thought it too, sitting at her table with my few hated coins. You are thinking, words are not bread. Words do not fill a barn. What good are 3 words to a man who needs money? So let me tell you what happened to me. I went home that night and I was ashamed of my bitterness, and I did the only thing I could afford to do, which was nothing but to try her words. I had a few coins to my name and I took them out and I held them, one at a time, and I felt like a fool, and I said it anyway. Enough, blessing, flow. Enough, blessing, flow. And nothing fell from the sky, no fortune arrived. But something else happened, and it happened that very night, within the day she promised. My eyes changed. I looked at those same few coins that I had hated an hour before, and for the first time in my life I did not feel poor. I felt provided for. I felt, for that one evening, rich. Not because the number had changed, but because the man holding it had. And a man who feels provided for makes different choices than a man who feels robbed. He does not panic. He does not grasp. He does not throw good money after the feeling of safety. He plans calmly. He gives freely. He waits patiently. And those calm, free, patient choices made day after day are the actual soil that wealth grows in. Within a year, not by magic, but by the steady work of a changed heart, we were not poor anymore. Not rich, mind you. We were plain people, and we stayed plain. But the desperate poverty was gone, and it was gone because I had stopped being a desperate poor man on the inside long before my outside caught up. The money followed the man. It always does. It cannot lead him. It can only follow. That is why the code works in a day, because it was never going to fill your barn in a day. It was going to change your eyes in a day, and your eyes are the only thing standing between you and everything you already have. Most people are starving in a full pantry because they have taught their eyes to see only the empty shelf. The 3 words turn your eyes around. And the moment your eyes turn, the famine ends, even before the harvest comes in. My grandmother passed many years ago now. I went through her money box after, the way she used to. There was almost nothing in it, a few bills, some coins. By the world's count, she died with nothing. But I knew the truth. She had been one of the richest people I ever knew, every single day of her long life. Because she had cracked the code so young that she never once, not for a single hour, knew the curse of feeling poor. She had enough always. She blessed it always. She let it flow always. And it flowed right through her whole life and out the other side, having watered everyone it touched, me most of all. So tonight, before you sleep, do what I did. Take out what you have, however little, however much. Hold it in your hand. Feel the fool, the way I did, and do it anyway. And say the 3 words over it. Enough, blessing, flow. Say it tonight, and by tomorrow you will not be a richer man, but you will be a wealthier one. And if you learn the difference between those two, that is the whole of it. That is the code. That is everything my grandmother knew, handed now to you, the same way it was handed to me, across a table, in the lamplight, from an old hand to a young one. The money will come, or it will not, in its own time. But the poverty, the real poverty, the one in the heart, that you can end tonight, with 3 words, over a single dollar, before the sun comes up.